Thank you, patriots, for fighting through such adversity for our nation's independence. Thank you, fallen heroes, for defending our nation in its time of division into South and North, and through the fire fratricide of war after the short-lived joy of liberation. We enjoy freedom thanks to your devotion. We will always remember your sacrifice and devotion. We will never forget your noble spirit of patriotism. Seoul National Cemetery, the nation's sanctuary, tended together with the people. Seoul National Cemetery is hallowed ground for patriots and fallen heroes who sacrificed their noble lives for our nation. It is rich in the spirit of the Korean people who have overcome one national crisis after another. It is a symbol of their determination to defend the nation and love for the nation. Seoul National Cemetery was established as a military burial ground in 1955 to honor soldiers who died during the Korean War. The cemetery was upgraded to a national cemetery in 1965, when those who died fighting for Korea's independence during the Japanese occupation period and those of national merit were also brought to rest here. In 2006, the National Cemetery was renamed Seoul National Cemetery. It covers an area of about 1.44 million square meters, about 353 acres, and some 180,000 people rest here in peace. Here, the spirit of the Korean people lives, for those who walk eternally with their fatherland. The sun and the moon will safeguard this hill. The memorial tower standing tall on the cemetery grounds is symbolic of Seoul National Cemetery. The tower was built to honor the loyalty and great service of all the patriots and the fallen heroes who sacrificed themselves for the nation and the people. Inside the tower are enshrined tablets of 104,000 fallen heroes killed during the Korean War, whose remains could not be found, and the remains of some 7,000 fallen heroes killed during the Korean War that could not be identified. A government effort to recover remains of soldiers who fell during the Korean War is still ongoing today. Of all the soldiers who died during the Korean War, 28,000 were buried in graveyards. At the graveyard, the heads of state are buried. President Lee Seung-man, who overcame the national crisis of the Korean War and established the RK-US alliance. President Park Chung-hee, who led the economic development of Korea through modernization. President Kim Young-sam, who executed economic reforms, including the real-name financial transaction system, and greatly furthered the nation's democratization. And President Kim Dae-jung, who devoted his entire life to human rights and peace. At the graveyard, they are buried patriots who led the righteous army struggles against the Japanese Empire during the closing years of the Great Han Empire, and patriots including Korean leaders of the March First movement who dedicated their lives to fighting for independence during the Japanese occupation. Patriots who fought for independence as members of the Korean Provisional Government before national liberation are buried in the graveyard for historical figures of the Korean Provisional Government. Enshrined at the altar to airless patriots are tablets of patriots who fought for independence and died without offspring and those whose remains could not be found. At the graveyard, 54,000 fallen heroes are buried who were killed in the battle for the nation. Since founding of the RK Armed Forces, including soldiers below the rank of colonel who died in the Korean War, counter-espionage operations and the Vietnam War, as well as law enforcement officers, army reservists and student soldiers. Seoul National Cemetery provides a dignified funeral for the deceased, laid to rest here with utmost sincerity and respect. Bereaved families and visitors perform ceremonies on the anniversary of the dead to pay tribute to those brave souls. Here, our nation's most hallowed ground, On New Year's Day and Memorial Day, the President, heads of the legislative, executive and judicial branches of government, ministers and heads of social organizations visit Seoul National Cemetery to honor those who served our nation. As the nation's sanctuary, Seoul National Cemetery is visited by some 3 million people every year. About 100,000 citizens, including students and members of social organizations, annually render volunteer service, such as dedicating flowers and tending graveyards, joining the larger effort to make this cemetery a beautiful park to remember and pay tribute to the brave souls. Every April, when the weeping cherry blossoms are in full bloom, Seoul National Cemetery hosts a spring blossom event to pay respects to the brave souls who fought for the country. When the hallowed ground is imbued with autumn ambience, the cemetery hosts the autumn event for citizens to feel autumn flavour. The Ministry of National Defence Band performs a concert every month. This is the place where heartfelt love for the nation and our people and the spirits of patriots live on. Seoul National Cemetery, hallowed ground, full of love for the nation.